Hello, everyone. Kurt Hofer here, and welcome back to another episode from Hofer Labs. Today, we begin the journey into Fiore's fourth Master Dagger plays. And just like we did with the third Master, we are going to take a deep dive look in regards to how this position may be achieved, what it might be, and some other considering factors that may or may not come with it as far as making this shape. To me, fourth Master Dagger is, again, it is just like all the rest of the Master plays. It is something that potentially could be an immediate thing, or it could be something that you struggle into and go to. And with that being the case here, let's get into it. Okay, so this week here, we're going to be moving into the fourth Master of Fiore's plays. And again, I'm going to kind of, once again here, we're going to be talking about the entry piece to this, because just like the previous one, when it comes to second and third Master, there's a lot of plays that go with it, and there's really one counter that happens in this, okay? And I want to be clear on something else here when it comes down to it, is that essentially, just because there's one counter does not mean that there's one counter. The reality is there's probably people kicking, scrapping, there's all sorts of nasty things. You're biting, gouging, anything that comes into place right here that's happening with this situation here. So the counter is, once again, it has to deal with effectively addressing something and then moving out of it when we come into different type of positions. But ultimately, it is a gateway to be able to cause greater harm to somebody. So again, for fourth Master, we're going to be talking about how to make this. Fourth Master Dagger, we're going back to the Mandrito side, okay? So in this case right here, he's going to be either throwing it some type of Mandrito where it's a Fendente or a Mazzani. It doesn't matter. Either or is fine. And I'm also going to talk a little bit right here about how I see fourth Master also becoming fourth Master coming from first Master as well. So we're just to make this easier here. We're going to give the thing that makes probably the most sense here in many people's minds is a person coming down with a knife, with a dagger shot coming from above, that nice Fendente line. And fourth Master here is essentially putting it so we cup our hands in a form or fashion where we are right hand over our left, and we're coming up and underneath on the person's arm. Now, again, this could be, if he's coming into this, maybe I've rotated out, I'm moving into this way right here, moving this way right here. Remember, war does not wait for the warrior. So in this case right here, I could have been just walking and all of a sudden it's like this right here. My foot's not in the optimal spot here, but I stopped the immediate thing here, which is the dagger in place, okay? So what this is really typically talking about here is the guy comes in with a Fendente shot. I'm coming up with it. I'm coming up and under. Now, ideally, I don't want necessarily come all the way up to the top. Potentially I do. I don't know. It depends on the size. But I think I want to have some space here in between. And there's a couple reasons for this. Is essentially this grip right here, if I'm already up to the top here, as far as this, I have less control. I'm on his wrist, which means that more of his arm can resist on this. So as he starts moving around, I am now on one focal point, and he's brought me right to the ground. Remember, this is someone that's coming at me. This is a static thing we're demonstrating right here, but if someone's doing this, they're not just going to let this happen. So by having a little bit of space in here, okay? Now I've got a little bit of space. If he starts pulling out with this, I've got more control of his arm. And this really right here might be more of like what the reality is about trying to control somebody in that fourth Master Dagger play, okay? It's just talking about, the first one here came across with a smack. Now we're here in a spot where he's really trying to step this into me. And it's this right here, and I'm using my hands into this play. And of course, one of the things he talks about is if he pushes my elbow, I'm right there in the place here where I'm getting stabbed. So you have to be considerate with that. Now we're seeing that once again, with one push, this can become devastating here for everybody. But I digress to this. Big thing right here we're looking at today is using the fourth Master and how we make fourth Master and also other things that may be happening with this, okay? So again, big thing right here, case study number 1, shot comes in with this, and I'm covering this immediately here into that position where I grab onto his wrist. I can do all sorts of things right here, which we'll be covering here in sequential weeks. But regardless, the point is from here is I've made control of his arm. Big thing about this, thumbs are a thing. If your thumbs, and I'm not going to demonstrate here because I like my thumbs, if you're trying to stop it like this, you are going to probably cause thumb injury. Your thumbs are not enough. Just make the shape, please. If I'm doing this right here, I'm trying to stop it here. His hands are going to go right through my thumbs, hyperextend them, and cause pain with inside of my hands. The big thing about this that makes it work is you're using the palm structure of your hand to get up into this. If I'm going into this with thumbs like this right here, I am probably going to have problems and actually dislocate, break, or hurt myself further with the thumbs. Big factors right there, big factors. Huge safety consideration, okay? So, fourth master dagger comes up with this. I'm moving up to right here. I put my hand here. Think about his arm as almost like the sword, and I've got control off this. I can grab him immediately on this, and from there we're going to start talking about plays here in sequential weeks, but ultimately that's the first one. First case study, okay? But that's the reality right here is, am I just walking around and doing this to people? Potentially. And by all means, please do not take that. I'm not telling people that that's not what happened right here. I'm saying that that is one thing that's happening. The first response may not be this. This is very unnatural to do. This or this is much more of a natural response than trying to put yourself fumbling out. This is very narrow, whereas this is bigger. Normally when we defend ourselves, it becomes a little bit bigger. We're trying to cover as much surface area that's coming at that, okay? So fourth master dagger, I don't necessarily see as just one shot, move in, okay? Let's look at this from a first master dagger position, okay? So from here, I come across and I go into the reinforcing, right? So say in this case right here, he starts leaning into me. Well now, in this case right here, this is that reinforced position we talked about from first master. I can now work into grabbing onto the person, okay? I'm not saying, and mind you, we'll get in. It's a static moment here. It's a static moment. But it doesn't mean that it can't happen. We can also utilize this right here. So if I make the first cover, boom, I haven't grabbed anything yet. But I can grab my wrist, I've got his wrist, and I'm moving in, and I'm working to control his arm. So that might look something along, as soon as he covers in with this, boom, he's going to try to drive in. I brace against, I grab his wrist, he starts to fight me, and now I'm into fourth master where I'm controlling that arm, okay? So it is a grip for grip for grip for grip. That's another method of it. Another way that may be possible is a similar thing right here from second master. Now mind you, does this happen that fast? We don't know. But ultimately right here, the more we know how to grab, the more we can respond and flow into different parts and not just make it one and done play. Second master shot. So again, I'm up in here. From this, I grab his arm and I seize into the wrist and I'm working once again. So when you are practicing this, try to find fourth master in all the master covers that you've done up to this point and have the person resist you. So second master here, second master here, he starts to pull away. I'm grabbing in and I'm working into this. Right? Of course, eventually then, level in the person cheating and using their offhand. Another variant. Well, let's look at third master. So here we're talking about the reverso shot. I pop right here. Well, now let's say in this case right here, so this is a spot that's advantageous for me because I'm right to his face. But what happens if I catch it late? And now, as he's sweeping towards my head, I grab and I work my way up into this. So remember, it's not just one cover. It is a continuation. And to show both sides here, go on this side here, further reverso. So he's going to throw that reverso shot. I'm here. He starts driving towards my face. So he's coming towards right here. And from this position, if I don't do something, he's going to put this right into the side of my head. So instead, I come down here, and he starts to move up for this. I'm going to grab, and I'm working towards the point where I can control this. And of course, make this as realistic in simulation as you want to. But it's about trying to find that portion. It's not just one thing. The masters for me, when it comes down to Furious Dagger, are a lot more about grips that you're trying to get to that will allow you strikes and other things here. But most importantly, to keep this thing out of your body. Okay? So that's it for what we have here as far as the introduction to fourth master dagger. Remember, like I said, this is just talking about the entry and possible considerations. So if you're training this at home with somebody, again, please be cool about what you're doing with this right here. Our bodies are important and we don't need to break anything. And and most importantly, please seek a martial arts instructor out there to help you out with this if you're trying to work with this. And then finally, not to mention also, this is not a modern day self-defense course here. This is a look at history. We're trying to understand things right here in the context of what this book is.
So you can see with the video, a lot of this is a continuation, at least in my thoughts, into utilizing other plays that allow us to get the grip. Of course, we can still grab onto the arm, and he talks about how you can turn and rip the dagger out of the hand here, which to me points immediately how much This is a connection also to the third master and also maybe even the first master when we talk about different blade grabs, which we'll get into here later on. But the big thing about fourth master dagger itself is I don't necessarily know if it is I'm coming up with both hands or if I'm working there. In the video, I talk about how I don't necessarily know how you get into this position other than like, is it a cover right here that I've grabbed on and I'm basically, it's like that baseball thing that people do, is like who gets the top portion of the bat? Potentially, I don't know. But what I do know is essentially there's to me, stopping with two hands does not always make sense because just like we've seen within Second Master and so many other of them, this elbow is a great way to push over. Now, part of the reason why it may not be the case right here is because if the person's pushing me while I'm also taking the entirety of that arm in that direction, could be. It could also be that because I'm holding here, maybe Fiore's holding this, but it's almost like he's starting to crank it in a direction. Could be. It's not necessarily, the Maestro is silent about this, but having practiced this quite extensively within our classes and whatnot, I believe that this is a continuation. It could be an immediate response of grabbing in because again, this is very narrow and a much more instinctual response might be something like this where you're trying to give as much defensive posture that's up there. To me, it makes sense that this is something that's worked there. This makes a lot of sense here because you can see how much of a window I have right here. This makes a response right here, so on and so forth. This makes a response, big spaces, right? But if I do this, it doesn't necessarily create the same thing. And like I said, doing this, we had an experience where somebody had their thumbs, hand went right through, hyperextend, and it sucks. Not a full hyperextension, but just feeling how much that like goes this way, it's not fun. So you have to make sure that it's right. That's why when we look at fourth master dagger, I wonder how much of it is a continuation into or out of that position rather than make the shape. So that's just my big thoughts on this right here. Again, looking at this, again, as we look at like the beginnings of third master and fourth master, there's a lot to consider getting into this. First master feels very, very simple. You're moving your hand up this way, you're covering it, and you're working into plays, right? When you start getting the complexity of different arms and everything else, why are we getting to this way? What potentially gets us to this position? Why might we go to this position? There's lots of things in here that we don't necessarily consider. And to me, it's not just a one and done kind of concept. So with that being the case here, that concludes the video. Please share your thoughts because fourth master dagger is interesting to me. It's very interesting because some of the setups that go on later on, they're structurally weaker, which tells me that this is a very quick, immediate response to something here. It's a very desperate response. And because both my hands are on one arm, I get the sense that this is telling you that the person is actually a lot more afraid or is constrained. Maybe this person's really trying to drive it in. Maybe their arm's tied up somewhere. We don't know. So why are there two hands on this? Many types of considerations in there. Actually, a quick anecdote about this. I was participating in an event last year called Yeehaw down in Huntsville, Alabama. That's Walker Skaggs. His event that he runs, it's fantastic. It's much more about armor, but within a block formation kind of concept right here. This year there's archers. It'd be fantastic. Last year I was fighting in the door at a barrier, and there's somebody from the other side that walked straight in. They used their armor very well. They were strong, robust, and I went up there and they immediately took the dagger out of my hand. My armor saved me, and I had everyone that was pressed up against here pressing here. It was the person on my left, Ed Wells, who ditched his pole arm and went straight up here and controlled Jake Webster's arm, who's trying to stab me with another dagger. He was very smart. He had two daggers on him. He didn't care. He was working in there. But it makes me wonder, is that the kind of situation that we're looking at with fourth master? Is that one right there? In my opinion, that is a huge look at potentially Fiore in the wild, quote unquote, actually in action. And I remember that because eventually we were able to constrain him and people were able to defeat Jake at the door, but it took a lot from everybody to do that. And it would not have happened if Ed had if he hadn't ditched his pole arm and gone into fourth master cover and stopping the arm. So again, that's another reason why I'm wondering, is this about, asymmetrical forces, asymmetrical strengths? Because both those men are very strong. And I'm fast and quick, but man, they could eat me for lunch in a straight and a head-on-head fight there. So anyway, that's just a quick anecdotal thing right there. Wanted to share that. I don't have the footage of that, unfortunately, but it was a lot of fun. It was very visceral and it was great. So it might be just more like how Fourth Master might be created. But anyway, with that being the case here, like I said, if you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe, share with a friend. Love to hear your thoughts and considerations out there. Here to make this as much about as realistic and authentic as possible here. Love to hear the thoughts, love to hear the comments out there. As always, everybody, please, until next time, as always, stay safe out there, train well, and fight on. I'll see you all soon.